It's that time again. Let's see what's in the vintage toy box. And today on Vintage Toy Box, we're doing another Toys Then and Now video. And once again, we're doing dinosaur toys. And to help me with this video, again, is my lovely husband Stephen, who is our resident dinosaur fundy. And he's going to be explaining the difference between dinosaur toys back in the 80s when we were kids and dinosaur toys now. So let's get on with the video.
Cool. Okay, so here we have a vintage toy of a Diplodocus.
And for those of you who've been to the Natural History Museum, the skeleton of this dinosaur is what stood in the main hall of the museum. He's on tour right now, but he'll be back.
And what's that skeleton called?
And that skeleton is called Dippy.
Dippy the Diplodocus. Some people say Diplodocus, but I prefer Diplodocus, but you know, it's open to argument. Anyway, this particular model or toy actually also came from the Natural History Museum, and I actually had this one when I was very young, probably in about 1983, so it is quite an old model, and as such an old pose. Now, as you can see, that you're seeing the head, but you're not seeing much of the tail. The tail sort of comes quite a lot longer, and that's kind of what these dinosaurs were famous for, was their length. Now this, as I was saying, was an old pose, but having said that, I still quite like this model, though maybe it's nostalgia, but I think it's quite well made. Apart from not being painted, it's got interesting skin, sort of elephantine, and even it shows some of the blood vessels and things like that. The toes that you probably can't see very well, but it has the right number of toes, which are 5, which a lot of toys don't get right. They just sort of stick an elephant's foot on the animal. Now, the elephantine type skin is actually incorrect, as we know it was covered in scales, but for an old reconstruction, this is still pretty good. And yeah, and I enjoyed playing with my dinosaurs, and this particular one was one of my favorites. If you pick them up now, which you can from eBay, like I did with this one, they go for around £10–12. Quite often, though, they do have the marks of children, if you like. They have teeth marks on the tail and stuff like that. That's what you get with an aged toy. Now, this here that I'm now picking up is the more modern version of this dinosaur, and it actually looks pretty different. And this particular model is from Collectica. Now they're quite good because they give us a fact sheet with it, which I will be telling you a few of the facts a little bit later. And as you can see, this model is painted and very well detailed. I'm not sure if you can see the head nicely in there, but
you can bring it a bit closer.
Let's see if the cameraman can tell me where to show it.
There you go.
Yeah, and you can see the head is really small for such a big dinosaur, which is baffled scientists for a while. And again, I'll explain a little bit of the reason for that later. Now, also with this model, you can see that the skin is scaly. They've actually found skin impressions of this sort of dinosaur, so this is how they know that this is actually accurate. It was scaly. Also, along the back, it has these spines, which, if you notice in the old model, it doesn't have that. And these are a new thing they have discovered whilst digging up later finds. This particular model is also pretty well detailed underneath as well, with the foot pad and the toes, and yeah, it's overall quite a good model. Now, the way it's standing isn't actually the way the model's supposed to stand. The model is actually supposed to stand like this, rising up, and this is something that they reckon perhaps these dinosaurs could do because they now know that it couldn't really raise its neck a lot. So if it wanted to get higher up, it'd have to stand on its back feet. Now the reason it couldn't raise its neck is the reason for its name, really. Its name, Diplodocus, means double beam, which basically what they found is in the vertebra there was like a double rod either side, which actually helped the neck lock in place. So it couldn't really lift up and down. And they ate mostly by standing on all fours with the neck stretched out straight and sort of mowed up or vacuumed up the grass, well, not grass, but the plant matter in front of it. And that was really efficient way of eating because they didn't have to move about much. So anyway, I think this is a brilliant reproduction of Diplodocus, and it only cost $4.99 from Everything Dinosaur. So, and collector models are, as far as I'm concerned, one of the best. However, that aside, this is still my favourite because it's nostalgic, and I grew up seeing Diplodocus like this, though I think the proper way of putting it up is really still pretty good. So now just a few small facts about this dinosaur is that it was, and I'm going to use the Everything Dinosaur fact sheet, it was about 27 meters long. So it was a really long dinosaur, and they think that it could have grown even bigger, up to 30 plus meters, and it was up to 5 or 6 meters to the shoulder here. So it's almost 3 times as tall as a man. So it's a fair dinosaur, and the weight is between 10 and 20 tons. It's quite difficult to actually measure weight in dinosaurs, and you'd think that such a big dinosaur actually would weigh even more, but that's because its bones were hollow and reinforced with small structures inside it, just like a bird's are, and so it saved a lot of weight that way. It lived in the late Jurassic period, about 157 to 145 million years ago. This is even before T-Rex and dinosaurs like that, so it's quite an old dinosaur. And it obviously, for those who are into dinosaurs or remember as a kid, this is a sauropod, and these were the biggest types of dinosaurs there were. Now this dinosaur, along with very many others in the late 1800s, was found by someone called Ornithol Charles Marsh, who was an American, not paleontologist, but per se as we would know it now, but he was an American collector and self-styled paleontologist who dug up loads of dinosaurs during something called the Bone Wars, and where he was in competition with another paleontologist. But perhaps we'll talk more about that in another day. So also with this one, as I said, it has 5 toes. One of the toes, which is not too well represented on the old model, but on the new model you can see it, was actually a thumb claw, which perhaps it could have used as defense against predators, like rearing up like that and then lashing out. Also, the lovely long tail. Now, I'm not too sure if the tail could do this, just like I know the tail couldn't lie flat like here. I think it might have been a bit stiffer. But we do know that the tail, being so long, could have perhaps been quite a good weapon, almost like a whip, though he'd have to be very careful not to break his tail. The other thing they reckon is that the tip of the tail would be like a bullwhip, and if this dinosaur wagged its tail, this tip of the tail could actually almost reach the speed of sound and crack like a whip and make a big boom, which could perhaps scare predators away or even communicate with other dinosaurs. So there's a lot of interesting things about this dinosaur. Now, as this is a Diplodocus, they belong to the group or the family of dinosaurs called Diplodocus. So there are many other similar dinosaurs, but obviously they're different species. And we're going to actually talk about another one of those species just now. But to go back to the vintage dinosaur, this is, as I say, a really nostalgic one for me, and I will probably have some pictures coming up to show what the skeleton in the Natural History Museum used to look like, sort of like how this is, and what it looks like today, or would look like today. As Rose said, it's actually gone on tour and is actually touring the world. So yeah, Dippy's having a lovely holiday. All right, so
the Natural History Museum's foyer is not the same without Dippy.
No, it's got the blue whale in, but I don't know, it still looks a bit empty to me. But you know, now I'm going to put these Diplodocuses aside and bring out the Brontosaurus.
Would that not be a Diplodocus? There were more than one.
I have no idea. I don't know how they do that with dinosaur names.
Oh my goodness, something our dinosaur expert doesn't know. We'll have to look it up.
Well, I'm not a language expert, so we put him to the side. Now, here we have our Brontosaurus, which, as you can see, is very similar again. Now, some of you might be saying, but Brontosaurus doesn't exist. That name was taken away. And yes, you would be right on one part of that. Because when I was a kid in the 80s, Brontosaurus was Brontosaurus. It was a diplodic-like dinosaur, but everyone knew Brontosaurus, which means thunder lizard. So everybody knew that it was a big dinosaur, and it was the stereotypical sauropod. But then later on, probably after I grew up, because I don't actually remember when it actually happened, but it would have been in the late 90s, they decided that Brontosaurus was a mistake, because again it was discovered by ornithol Charles Marsh. Now, he found this dinosaur. If I am correct, I'm going to refer to my fact sheet again, because this is from Collectica. He found this dinosaur also in the late 1800s, probably around 1877. And he found a dinosaur that he named Apatosaurus, which is the name everyone says the Brontosaurus has changed to, which was very similar to Brontosaurus. And then 2 years later, he found another sauropod dinosaur, which he called Brontosaurus. And he did not link the two, although he thought that they were similar. He thought they were definitely different species. However, in the late 90s, some paleontologists got together and thought, no. Brontosaurus is just another specimen of Apatosaurus, because it's so similar. It's not a different species. So in science, the name that an animal was first given is the one that takes precedence. So as they were saying that the two skeletons were the same animal, they had to take the first name, which was Apatosaurus, and Brontosaurus was dropped. Of course, this is a very simplified way of explaining it, but that's basically what happened. However, that was not a very popular decision, and I must say, I, in a way, was a bit disappointed with it, because you grow up knowing Brontosaurus. But in 2015, a group of scientists, or paleontologists, got together and did a complete review of almost every single diplodocid specimen and fossil that has been found to date. And after reviewing the Apatosaurus skeletons, they came to the conclusion that the Apatosaurus and what was called the Brontosaurus are in fact different enough from each other for Brontosaurus to actually be a species in its own right. And they even suggested that there was obviously a time difference where one lived before the other. So after doing this massive in-depth review, and presenting their findings, it was agreed that actually Brontosaurus, the skeleton that was originally named Brontosaurus, actually is its own species, and so Brontosaurus was reborn. So that's something great, and I'm really happy with that one. So, as you can see from this model, I don't have a vintage one of it, but I do have this model from Collectica, which shows the current pose, you know, and this is very much how the Diplodocus looks as well. Again, with this particular model from Collectica, it's very nicely done. It's nicely painted, got some lovely scaling on it, and also these spikes, which they believe are on there, as well as, I'm not sure if you can see, but these little bumps here, which are called scutes, which are almost like little bits of bone embedded in the skin, which may have been some form of defense, though we don't know if this dinosaur actually had that, where we suggest. And you can also see here the thumb claw, which we were discussing earlier. All these types of dinosaurs had it, and as you can also see, it has a really small head. Now, the heads of sauropods very rarely get found, or if they are found, they're usually quite damaged. So the actual head of both this and Diplodocus are not 100% sure, because the heads that they've got have either been badly damaged or not found at all. I do believe they have found some good skull matter, so this inference of what the head looks like is pretty good. And again, you would think, small head, massive dinosaur, how can it eat enough? Again, what it would do is just stand all day, hoovering up the grass, walk a couple of steps, do it again, and that's kind of what it did all day.
Hang on, grass?
Well, grass, yes, sorry. Grass did not exist then. Vegetation of stuff. And then, if we bring back, this one, as well as this one, you could see they got very big barrel-y shaped stomachs, and that's because they had a massive stomach, because all the digestion happened in the stomach, not in the mouth. They didn't chew their food, they just gulped it down. And what they did to chew their food is they swallowed stones called gastroliths, and in the stomach these stones, and they polished stones, would rub together and actually literally grind up the food into a pulp, and it would ferment in that big gut, and then they would get the nutrients out of that, and then it would obviously come out the other end in massive piles, just like you see in Jurassic Park. So a little bit of information about this dinosaur is that, despite the fact that it's called thunder lizard, and a lot of people might think that it's bigger than Diplodocus, we think that it's slightly smaller, perhaps about 22 meters, 25 meters long, and therefore would probably weigh, you know, maybe 15 tons, although it was slightly heavier built in general than the Diplodocus, so it could be of a similar weight. Again, weight's very difficult. It lived in the late Jurassic, very similar time period to Diplodocus, though whether they actually ever came across each other, we don't know. And obviously, it's a herbivore, a plant eater. And again, as far as my childhood goes, I remember Brontosaur toys looking like the original Diplodocus one that we've got here, with slightly smaller tails, and definitely no spikes or anything. But yeah, I think that these toys that we had when I was a child were still very good at getting one interested in natural history and dinosaurs and all that caper. So I think that's basically all we need to say today on our little dino safari with our vintage and current dinosaur toys. Next time I have another vintage dinosaur toy to review. In fact, I have two. One of them, however, is not actually a dinosaur. it actually flies. So you may be able to guess what that might be, but we will see in our next review what they look like. So for me and my little storytelling, I'm going to end there. So yeah.
And that's our video. I want to thank my lovely husband Stephen for doing the video again with me.
Yeah, it was great fun.
And if you like this video, please rate, comment and subscribe down below. It really helps us a whole lot. Now this probably will be our last video for this year, but rest assured there'll be plenty more videos in the new year on this channel. I just want to say thank you to all my lovely subscribers out there and wish you all a Merry Christmas or Happy Holidays and a prosperous and wonderful new year. And I look forward to seeing you all again in the new year. Thank you for all your support throughout this year. And from me?
Well, it's goodbye from you, and it's goodbye from me, and happy holidays, and hope to see you soon.
Bye.
Bye.